It's uncensored. It's live 24/7. It's chaoticradio.com.
Welcome to Chaotic Radio. You're joining Women Talking Football. My name is Carrie Taylor, and Women Talking Football is a show about the great game of football and how women can impact and influence the world's game. So tonight we have hopefully two guests in the studio. We have a good friend of mine, Hubert Busby Jr. I'll let him introduce himself here for a second. And we also have a good friend, Sarah, who's going to call in from New York, who stayed up past her bedtime. So while she calls in, I'll turn it over to Junior here, and please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. I want to, full disclosure, I did not bring this weather with me from the Pacific Northwest, but great to be here tonight. Fantastic premise, obviously, to be able to speak about women's football with you. Originally from Toronto, spent the last 10 years in the Pacific Northwest working with both the Vancouver Whitecaps women as well as the Seattle Sounders women, and just great to be here and look forward to discussing women in football.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. To those of you that are listening or that are watching on Facebook, if you want to call in and ask questions at any time, the call-in number for the show is 909-360-8330. Again, the call-in number 909-360-8330. Good friend Sarah's calling in from New York. Is she on the line, Mike? Okay, awesome. Hey, Sarah, can you hear us? Hey, Sarah, can you hear us?
I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for calling in from New York. What time is it there? Midnight?
Yeah, it's about midnight, a couple hours past my bedtime. But I'm psyched. The show that you're doing, and when you first started talking about it, absolutely something I wanted to be part of and support.
To stay up for. Awesome. Well, we're going to get to you first because we want you to be able to get a good night's sleep. So, Sarah, just give us who you are and what you're doing, a little bit on your background, and then we're going to hit you up for some questions for the show.
Oh, gosh. All right. So I guess I'd call myself a Title IX baby. I'm sort of from that generation where we're first getting a chance to play and played through high school and college, multiple sports, kind of old school in that way. And really wanted to just coach after college. So that's what I did. Spent about 10, 15 years coaching different colleges, climbing their ranks, and now I'm working with primarily youth programs in New York.
So that's awesome that you're doing that. And I know that you're kind of in a unique situation with your current club. So you are, and correct me if I'm wrong, and make sure you tell me the name of the club and everything. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the only female coach coaching at a boys' club. Correct?
I am. Well, it's a boys-only club.
Okay.
And being the only female coach at a club is not a new thing. Even at girls' clubs, I've been the only female coach. But
right.
I made the switch this year, and it's Eastern FC in New York, based out of Westchester primarily. And it's been an interesting run.
So, what age group are you currently working with?
Right now, I have a little bitties. So I have the 10s, which is a little younger than I'm used to, and I also work with the goalkeepers and do a couple of the other development programs.
Okay. Well, in addition to that, I know you're currently working also with a college program, with a men's college program. So can you give us a little bit of background on that, and then we'll get to the meat of the tough questions.
Oh, good. These are the easy ones. Great.
Exactly.
So I'm working as the assistant men's coach at Dutchess Community College, which is a small, essentially Division III community college. For those of you outside of New York, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how you drive, north of Manhattan.
Okay.
And I finished my second year there, or I'm in my second year there.
Awesome. And I know a little bit of background on where you've been coaching and everything. Can you speak to me about the differences, first of all, between coaching boys and girls in your experiences? If there is a difference, is there a difference?
It depends. Yes and no. I know there's tons of books written on it, and everybody can go off on that for hours. I think my initial sort of way I got into coaching was as a goalkeeper coach. So right off, you're coaching girls and guys that just kind of throw them together. So that was kind of familiar to me pretty much from the get-go. But as for teams, pretty much as a female coach, you're stuck with the girls' teams. Not stuck with them, but that's what you're given.
That's
and
what you're usually
the role
placed
model.
with. Yeah, you're usually placed there because the men will coach the men and the women will coach the women.
Yep, and so that just really sort of came. I worked with guys before, as I said, coming through, and then had opportunities sort of internationally with a chance to travel abroad and work primarily with guys, actually, where there really weren't many female players. That just came about kind of by chance. A friend had told me that his friend was looking for an assistant. The schedule fit in. They train early, so I could still do the club stuff. And, it's been neat. The biggest difference I found was really that it was not between the genders, but between 2-year and 4-year schools. I was not expecting that. When he told me we've got 7 returners, and that was a huge number, I was kind of like, what?
Right.
Coming from a 4-year school where you're expecting a lot more than that. But if I was to pick out one big difference, it's really the international aspect of it. We have players on our team right now who are from Egypt. We have players from Ecuador. We have players from Mexico. We had a player from the Ivory Coast last year. I think the biggest minority on our team is a single player, a single white player from Long Island. Oh. So it's a very diverse mix, and it's really kind of neat. A lot of them are first generation over or came over, even in high school. So you don't see that on the girls' side, and it's been a lot of fun.
You mean you don't see necessarily diversity in soccer on the girls' side? Is that kind of what you were referencing?
Not in the same way, no.
Right.
I can't say I've ever worked with a girls or women's team that had a range, this greater range of players and this greater range of backgrounds.
Right. Hubie, what do you think? Are there differences between coaching boys and girls or men and women?
Well, first of all, thanks, Sarah, for joining us tonight. This is Hubert Busby here. First of all, how's the weather there in the East Coast?
It's a little colder than what you guys have out there.
It's raining here. I had to drive in the rain tonight, so it's like the sky is falling out here.
Yeah, we have ice, so,
A quick question from me here, and obviously there's some subtle differences, but I think from your perspective, what do you think are there any differences? What would they be from your past experiences?
Besides the backgrounds of the players?
Yeah, just in terms of coaching, the difference between boys and girls from your past experiences.
Is it? I mean, the football's the same. Are there any other intangibles, perhaps?
Let's see. I think it really depends on the age and level that you're working with. I think at the higher levels of play, the differences, you might see differences in strength and different physical components of it, but as a whole, the coaching doesn't really change. I don't believe all that much at the higher levels. The players are more serious, more focused, and that's where they're really driven. At the younger levels or the levels of play that may not be at the highest level, you do see some differences, I think. But I think a lot of times those differences, we like to pull them out so much, but it really varies a lot by player and by that team's makeup. And I think I've had some girls and guys teams that are pretty much almost the same in personality. But it's, we like to look for differences when there might not always be as many.
So, question, how did the boys' parents receive you? Because I know from my experiences, I've coached a college men's team, and I've also coached younger boys from age 12 to 14, and I have some stories, but I want to hear, were there any challenges? Did you have to build trust? How were you received by the younger, specifically younger boys' parents?
The younger ones? Wow, I think it's a mix. It really depends. I guess the best way I can describe that was I started working with the Eastern Club sort of got on board last spring, but didn't really get involved too much until the fall season. But in the spring, they had a sort of wrap up the year and introduce new staff, introduce new players barbecue. And from one parent, an older gentleman, he kind of said, "Good luck," and it was sort of one of those good lucks, like, "Yeah, right, this isn't going to work."
Like a sarcastic kind of good luck?
A little bit,
good
thinly
luck.
veiled. But I was, you smile and nod. I'm like, "Thank you," and you just, pretend you didn't hear sort of the tone.
Right.
And took it for just what it was. But then, at that same event, I was approached by a couple, sort of individually, by a couple moms, and it really surprised me. A few of them came out of their way to kind of pull me aside and say, "We're glad you're here." And
That's
one
great.
of them was really almost emotional as she was talking. She's like, "I'm glad you're here. When I was younger, I didn't get to play." And she went off on a whole, I'd never met her before. She went off on a whole story about why she was so happy that, she was seeing a female here. So that really surprised me. You do get the range from people who think you have no business being there to others that are really, whether vocal or not, very supportive. So it's I think there's a range, just like that.
Right. Have you, I know I had a story when I was coaching a boys team where I was coaching and the opposing coach looked at me and said, "Shut up, lady," and it kicked off and the referee ended up throwing him out of the game. Have you had any challenges coaching against other coaches who are intimidated or whose egos might be rubbed the wrong way by coaching against a woman, specifically if you win?
What, there's egos in soccer? No,
never. Come on. Everybody gets along. Everybody's in it for the right reasons.
Yeah. I think really you see it both with your coaching girls or guys. I've seen it on both sides. I've had referees who tell you to be quiet as soon as you raise a complaint, whereas the guy you're coaching against is screaming his head off and he doesn't say word one to him. And I don't think that really matters whether it's a girls or boys team. I've seen it on both sides. There's obviously opposing coaches who have mistaken me for the team mom.
Yeah.
There's other
I've gotten
ones.
that too.
Team manager.
Team manager.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Team manager is the nice word. Team mom would be the other. And then at the college level, I know there's definitely been players who've come up asking me to tape their ankles. I'm like, "I'm not the trainer. I can give you a Band-Aid, but that's about all I've got." So there's definitely assumptions that are made. But you see it on both sides, whether it's working with a women's program or working with a men's program.
Right. We have a question on Facebook from Ruth Nicholson. So she's posted a question on Facebook Live. She wants to know, from a group dynamic perspective, what differences are there between the interpersonal processes of becoming a team, i.e. team bonding, between male and female players? Is there any?
Talk about that.
What's that?
Oh, sorry, I think I just lost your sound for a second there.
Okay. So the question was, is there any differences in team dynamics or team bondings between male and female players? And that's for you, Junior, or for Sarah.
I'll interject here. I definitely think I've found in working with different teams, especially with younger age groups, that in terms of the team chemistry, that if you start a season off, if you get on an early kind of road trip or some sort of early season tournament, you'd find that the girls seem to come together. I think the boys, and again, sometimes different by age, but I think boys are kind of happy-go-lucky. They're always the same kind of way, and but I definitely think there is something to be said for the team dynamics, that if anyone who's out there coaching young girls and you get your team together early or at the beginning of the season, if you can somehow have some sort of team function or team getaway where it allows the girls to come together and trust each other, I think it's a great idea. And again, I think it's not for everyone, or every team would be the same. I think it's kind of a coach kind of understanding their team dynamics. Again, age and maturity plays a huge part in that. But in general, I think the girls would kind of, will need some time to kind of get to know each other and their confidence within the group. And the boys seem to be the same all the time, in my findings anyways.
Sarah, are you there?
Yeah. Wow, that question could go on forever, I think. I think there are some differences. I think it can look different. I think some of the team bonding that were, how would I even put this in summary? Restart that one. Yeah, I think there are some similarities. There are some differences. I think the girls, the look sometimes from the outside appears a little different than, say, the boys. But they all kind of want to be part of the team, and how you kind of go about that is, as you said, different with each team, but feeling it out to make sure that everyone feels a part of it. I think both girls and guys want that, want to be a part of it, some more than others. I think you just kind of navigate it with each team more than anything else, and recognize that I think on the girls' side there's a little bit of more constant sort of push and pull kind of, but whereas guys, once you get them or once they get together, it doesn't matter if they blow up at practice. They're fine the next day, whereas girls, it might take a little bit longer sometimes. But again, that varies depending on the team and the players. I don't want to generalize.
You can generalize. You can generalize a little bit. Like, it's, we're all soccer people, football people. We get it. We get it that there's no two teams alike. I mean, one thing that I've found is, within the boys, it's like the boys have their pecking order. They know who the alpha dog is. They know who the best player is, and as long as they're all out there, like, they get on with the football. Whereas the girls, they kind of have to have a little bit more of that friendship and trust built up, and they also have to trust you as a coach. And I found that with coaching the girls is, if they don't trust you, they're not going to play for you. And that's, as a coach, it's, for me, is trying to, navigate the psychology of it. And again, every team is different, but the boys, as soon as they usually know what you're talking about and, you can motivate them, they're on board. Whereas the girls, if they don't think that you care about them or believe in them or trust them, then they're going to not, give it, because it's almost that fear of, well, our coach doesn't believe in us or our coach doesn't trust us, so why bother, battling for each other? So
I think those are all very, very good points, and I'd definitely be on board with those ones as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to change, not really change gears a little bit. I know, Sarah, you've been doing a lot of writing, and you're involved with something called the Female Coaching Network. Can you speak about what the Female Coaching Network is and kind of maybe one of the initiatives or some of the things that you're involved in with that?
Yeah. The Female Coaching Network was started in England, and it's really been started as a community of female coaches across different countries and across all sports, sort of a way to promote both what's going on, the positives, and maybe some more challenges that are going on as well, and just really a way of connecting people, taking advantage of a lot of the technology that's available now that we didn't have 10, 15 years ago, where you can connect through Facebook, you can connect through Twitter, you can connect through internet, Skype calls, meeting that way, which has been really neat to see what other sports are doing, as well as what other countries are doing in the same sport.
Right.
So for me, that's been absolutely fascinating, and it's also given a voice to a lot of sort of, I guess we all kind of complain a lot about the lack of coverage of women's sports at every level, and the lack of coverage of females involved in sport, whatever that role is. And it's really sort of trying to provide a forum to get information out that most news outlets aren't going to cover.
Right.
And whether it's a sport that, in the U.S. nobody really talks about, cricket, which is they do in England, but getting that information out about female coaches and female teams involved in it, and just kind of furthering information that's available about coaches and for coaches.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed following them on Twitter. Do you have their Twitter address by chance? Maybe we can... I
believe it is FCN Network. I will double check that right now, except I could check that on my phone, which I'm talking to you on.
Okay, well, we'll get that out there. Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed... I know they have, a Women's Wednesday and different things.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed, the interviews of, other sports, not just football, just kind of hearing... the positives and the negatives about, the trials and tribulations of all women across all sports. And I know there's an initiative that you're involved with that, something about Share Your Story. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think one of the things I've found in talking to friends who coach, you and others, is that there's a lot of stuff out there that goes on with female coaches that isn't really talked about, and it's not the X's and O's, and it's not, get your license or anything like that. It's really the stuff that sort of flies under the radar. As coaches, we really work a lot in isolation at times, and sometimes being the only female on staff or one of a few females on staff, there's sort of not a lot of people you can connect with what really happens. I don't know, I guess the inappropriate things that go on, whether it's as simple as being called kiddo or dear when you give somebody a roster, or whether it's, having
harassment.
Having a
harassment that goes on.
Well, yeah, that would be another way to put it. Okay, so whether it's on the mild end of it or whether it goes to, just the stuff you shake your head at. I worked for an organization once, and we were going to an annual tournament, and at that tournament we would always have a coaches function. The tournament was for girls, and most of the coaches were men, one or two women. Some years I was the only woman, other years I was one of maybe two or three. And that function was always at Hooters.
Oh.
And it's
lovely.
Just,
no comment.
And it was brought up at multiple times that maybe we could find somewhere else. This was not really a isolated location. There are certainly other venues available, shall we say. But it was just one of those things that they didn't see a problem with the organization helping to foot the bill for your social function while you're at a girls' tournament being at Hooters.
Right.
How do you even quantify that? There's not really something
You
that says
don't.
that's
You
not
really
really. Yeah.
And if you mention it, they say, grow thicker skin, or, oh, what's wrong with Hooters?
Yeah, and I did, pushed it at different levels at different times, and eventually it was moved out of there, but it took a few years.
Right.
And a few coaches were like, oh, yeah, we were, we didn't really care. We didn't care where we went. We didn't have to go to Hooters. And I'm like, but we were still there.
Right. So basically what you're doing with the Female Coaching Network and Share Your Story is trying to collect stories from women across all sports that, are some of the undertone stories that aren't necessarily talked about. Is that kind of the premise of it?
We get asked a lot why women aren't in coaching or don't stay in coaching, and I think those isolated incidents don't sound like a big deal, but when you take them over, when you realize that they're happening to a lot of the women involved in coaching, or you're realizing over a 20-year career how many times you get called honey, dear, sweetie, how many times you get asked out by a boss, how many times you get inappropriately approached or flirted with in front of your team by a colleague, or have to go to Hooters, they start to add up after a while, and it doesn't become just one person doing it. It becomes sort of systemic, and I think that's something that really needs to be brought into the light. One story you could say, just chalk it up to, grow thicker skin, whatever, deal with it, boys will be boys, as it were. But I think that really sort of dismisses the importance of this stuff wouldn't be appropriate in a corporate world. Why is it appropriate here still?
That's a good point.
Right. So what I'm going to do, Sarah, is I will put the Share Your Story link on the Women Talking Football Facebook page,
that'd be great.
so that we can get some people to hopefully share their stories. Because I
think one thing that's important to know is that it's anonymous. The survey that we put together, we used SurveyMonkey. And there's a series of, I think we have maybe 8 questions that are, what sport are you in? How long have you been coaching? You can answer as many or as few of them as you'd like. If you really want to keep it kind of anonymous, obviously share less information. And the story, we also have in it that if you want it shared with your name, we can do that. Otherwise, you can keep it completely anonymous, where we'll wipe out any mention of a particular club or organization. So people feel more free to do it, because I know a lot of times friends of mine, and myself included, have not spoken up in ways that we would really like to. You do it kind of to a point, but you may not say more just for fear that, jeopardizing a job and a career.
Right.
So in this way, we're hoping to give voice and have it sort of a mass voice, not just an individual voice.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic initiative, and I need to get on there and share a couple of my stories. I'll share one really quickly that actually happened this spring. I was coaching a state cup game, and a ball came in, and I received it out of the air, and trapped it to my feet. And the referee looked at me and was like, "Oh, nice touch, coach." Well, then he proceeded to chat me up for the rest of the game. And after the game, came over and handed me his business card and told me that I'm single, I have no kids, and I have a job. Do you want to go out? And I was like, Yeah, you gave a pretty good pitch, so I'll take your card. And then I threw it away as I walked away. I was like, who does that? I don't think there's many male coaches getting asked out by referees.
I can't say I haven't. No.
That's a new one for me, too. I've not had that one before.
Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah. So I've got plenty of stories to share. So I'll get that on the Women Talking Football Facebook page, and we'll hopefully get some stories out there. Okay. Let's see. On Facebook, Kai Edwards says tell Hubert hi. So Kai's watching on Facebook, so that's awesome.
Kai, how you doing, my friend? Hope you're doing well. Let's look to catch up soon. Great to hear. Thanks for looking us up.
Yeah, if you want to call in, again, the call-in number is 909-360-8330. So real quick, before we have a commercial break coming in about 5 minutes, but Sarah, another question came in on Facebook, and the question is, and I know you're married, the question is, what challenges does your spouse face when you're a female coach? Do you wanna hit that topic right now? You got 5 minutes before commercial. You got 5 minutes before commercial, so go.
I think we can do that. You mean besides the little rubber pellets that seem to come home with me every day from the field?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Don't you hate that?
I found some in my freezer one time. I don't know how that happened, but yeah. So challenges that your spouse and you face as being a female in the business.
I think one, I guess there's lots you could talk about. I think one in particular that's come up is when you go to a social function and the coaches hang out together and the coaches' wives hang out together. Where does my husband go?
Good point.
And that's,
and he's not in soccer. He's not in soccer, is he? No,
he's into sports. Obviously, he gets it. He's quite comfortable around them. It's actually his profession, though he's not a soccer coach. And it's one of those things that we enjoy hanging out with each other. So I'm happy to have him with other coaches and myself. But then you're really sort of playing with dynamics a little bit, where there's the bonding between the wives, and he's not a wife, and he doesn't really fit in that mix, and he doesn't really fit in the soccer coach's mix. So it's sort of it kind of puts him the odd man out a little bit, and sort of changes the dynamics or the norm of the dynamics a little bit.
Right. Anything else?
Oh, gosh, that's the first one that comes to mind. If you give me a moment, I'm sure I can think of a few more.
Well, I've heard the excuse of, some people say, well, you might have kids, or, a woman's not going to stay in the game. Have you ever had any bosses or anybody kind of use that line of reasoning, or has that come up with you at all?
Yeah, definitely. On one hand, I think people are very curious if I'm married for a lot of reasons, whether that's for dateability factor, whether that's for which gender I prefer.
Good point.
So you do get kind of a lot of the veiled questions of kind of feeling out when they first meet you. Who's your partner? When you're not, you say partner,
right.
Is that wife? Is that husband? Kind of all those questions I don't really want to ask in public. The kids question always comes up. I don't have kids. I like to say I borrow and return them.
Yep. And you don't have to pay for them either. That's what I love.
This is true. This is true. But a lot of times people do assume that because I am a woman coaching that they want to know which child is mine on the team, assuming that that's the only reason I'm involved in it. And, I'm certain that my male colleagues get that question too, but I don't know if they get it quite as often.
Right. Yeah. So we're gonna go. Are we good for a commercial break right now?
Yeah, whenever you are, Dutchie.
Okay. So Sarah, we're gonna go to a commercial break, and feel free. You can stay on the line and contribute to the next hour, or if you want to go to bed, no problem. Either way, we'd love to have you.
Oh, when the Yanks go marching.
No BS just won't do. ChaoticRadio.com.
The name of the game. The name of the game. The name of the game. The name of the game.
Welcome back to Chaotic Radio. I'm Carrie Taylor, and you're listening to Women Talking Football. Just came back from commercial break, and I want to give a couple of shout-outs. The first shout-out is kind of an important one. There's a local business called intellexstrategy.com, and they are offering some financial aid to two women who want to attend the National Soccer Coaches of Association of America's coaching symposium in LA. So the website for that, if you want to apply for some money to attend an awesome convention, Intellex, INTELLEX strategy.com. Thank you, Sandeep, the owner of Intellex Strategy, for putting the money up and being an advocate for women, female coaches and players within the game. So that's our first shout out. Our second shout out is to Coaches Across Continents, which is a awesome nonprofit that I had the honor of volunteering for this summer. I got to go to Africa. They are doing a fundraiser for Haiti, trying to create some after-school programs in Haiti. So go on coachesacrosscontinents.org, and they're having a little initiative called Spread Holiday Cheer, Win Cool Gear. So you can win a Jazzy Zardes autographed jersey, and I believe some other cool things if you donate some money to Haiti. So thank you, Coaches Across Continents. Keep on doing good work. All right. So, Hubie, your turn.
All right. Well, first of all, I really want to say, obviously, it's a great charity and organization to be able to do that because, having spent, literally 10 days for the U20 Caribbean Championships in Haiti, here's a country in the Western Hemisphere that is really, really, poor and could use it, but the passion and the people, I mean, it's phenomenal, and to be able to see the way that these kids responded to the beautiful game and to be able to help them out and just the basics and to have a ball and to possibly have shoes and have things to be able to play with are so important to the psyche of young kids, but also important to keeping people's spirits up. And so I think it's a great cause, and whatever we can do to kind of keep on promoting that, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were there with the Jamaican women's under-20 national team? Yeah,
for the Caribbean Championships. And, again, credit to the hosts. They did did a great job in putting the Caribbean teams up. And obviously we lost Haiti. The country came out in droves, close to 10,000 people to watch their U20. So they're very, very passionate and, to have everything, happen that center where they played. And, again, it just goes to show you the importance of sport and what that means to a country and what it means to its people. And what's really amazing is to see the fact that they've got some backing and they've put all this money, even a country with very little has actually stepped up to do something for its women's program. So credit to them. And, again, anything we can do from here, and we've got different sort of problems here in SoCal, and it just kind of gives you perspective. And every time you think you've got it hard, or you remember the things that you've seen and witnessed in the time there, it just gives you a different perspective altogether. So it's great. Yeah.
So you have spent a lot of time within the ranks of the women's pro and semi-pro game. So can you tell us a little bit about, your workings with the Seattle Sounders women and your times with the New York Flash and also the Soul, the WPS? Can you talk a little bit about the women's pro game and challenges?
Do you have another 2 hours?
Well, you can come back. You don't live too far away now, so you can come back. But just kind of give us, some of the things that you've seen and witnessed, and maybe some players that you coached, and suggestions that you have for building the leagues?
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot. That's a broad question.
There's a broad question. I would say, like, again, through everything, I think it just, the hot topic right now is equality, and I think across the country, regardless of sport, it's equality and making sure that people have a voice. In terms of soccer, we're championing it because obviously in not to get too political in terms of women's national team and everything in this country, but it happens all across the globe in terms of federations and being involved or having knowledge of different federations from Canada to Jamaica, and obviously a little bit in terms of the U.S. It's amazing to know that everywhere you go, that the same problems exist. The fact that there's not equal share, there's not equal pay. There's all these issues in terms of where people stay, the basic things,
how they travel,
and
food budgets.
Yeah, especially
equipment.
For me, I need a food budget, coach. But
you need to fly first class with your long legs. So.
I'm fighting for everything. But it's just everything that goes along with it, and especially when you're talking about representing a club and you're representing a country that that you're out there with the brand, or you're up there with the shield. It's so important, and there's no reason why those things. I mean, listen, we get it. Apples for apples. We get a little bit of the budget, but the disparities is a problem, right? I mean, we get some of it in terms of the budgets and things that draw, but because they're so far apart, that's always left me kind of championing for the programs I'm in naturally, but also to make sure that the players above everything else are looked after the way that they should be.
Yeah, and I know you worked with the Seattle Sounders women who were kind of like the farm system to the NWSL Seattle Reign, correct?
Well, I think we've had a partnership. Yeah, we had a partnership. Nothing direct. Obviously, one of the things that we always try to do is to work with people. Is always better results when you work with it. I think when you're talking about some of the constraints of what the NWSL have in terms of roster sizes and what that looks like in terms of being able to place kids out of college with a program that continue to have them train with the first team and have them get games with us. So we had sort of kind of a little bit of relationship where players kind of went back and forth for that to happen. But even within, you think about the sacrifices kids make after playing 4 years of college and then put their life on hold and don't put their degrees to good use because they want to continue following this dream. And when you
they make like $6,000
a year, and
minimum salary,
right? And so
a year. You can barely live on $6,000 a month in Southern Cal.
So I've noticed. But it just goes to show you that the passion. That these players have to continue to do it, and I think there needs to be a thought in the idea that if the women's national team and these leagues help produce these players, allow them to step onto the stage, and you find the Shannon Box of the world that the WUSA gives a stage to go on and be a world class player and 100 caps and World Cup winner and Olympic winner. After coming off a college career, that stage allows them to do that. But if you're leaving the pro game because you need to pay your bills and you got pay your car note and the basics to find a job, and so you don't close the gap, and you'll never be able to, no matter what you do in the grassroots level, if you push that next group of players, that next wave will never be able to kick on and make the other players at the top better because those players are constantly dropping out because they have to
They're
go
retiring.
On.
They're retiring at like age 23.
And so those
24.
Those are things that I think in terms of overall allowing for the game to grow at the top end, they need to be addressed. And I've been really privileged to be able to work in that sort of college mindset where some guys like Kai would send some of his college kids to me or recruit for me in some of the different programs I've been in, but have those players who, again, college, spend 3 or 4 months in an environment like Seattle, environment like Vancouver, looking to improve their game to go back to college is a testament to them, without being paid, and then allowing for them to kind of kick on and go on and have great seasons and then put themselves in the shop window for those who are seniors to kind of possibly get drafted. I think it's all very, very positive. And, I'm just really, honored and I feel privileged to be able to have spent or shared a part in that process for these young players.
Right. So my mom lives in Portland, and if there's any, NWSL franchise that does it right, the Portland Thorns, I think, have they have the special sauce. And in my mind, to me, it's like, hey, MLS franchises, you should all have a women's team, and you should do it. You should model after Portland, and Portland is a soccer city, and there's certain things you can take the train right down to the stadium, and I mean,
I hate to say that after being associated with the Seattle Sounders women, but it's true.
It's true.
it's
very,
true.
Very true. I mean, literally, I went to visit my mom, and I planned the trip where the Portland Timbers played on Saturday.
Yeah.
And the Portland Thorns played on Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was my time to go. Went to both games, and literally the women's game was sold out. They handed you a roster with the songs on it, and they did, like, I think it was like a Mother's Day giveaway or something. And it was an awesome soccer environment. And to me, it's like, okay, why can't you have that in LA? Why can't you have that in New York? If it can be done in Portland, I almost think like, hey, like, let's piggyback it.
Absolutely.
And use the infrastructure from the men's pro team that's already there. How can we grow the game at the pro level on the women's side?
Well, I think the logistics standpoint is, if you look at some markets and you look what a great just switching gears, if you look at a club like FC Dallas, and they do a great job of bringing homegrown players through for the men's side, and they do such a good job in their academy. But at the same token, I think they maybe have 20,000 season or seats that they sell, but they only sold out maybe 17 or 18,000, right? So they're still losing possibly some revenue. Like, they're a big market city, but they're not drawing maybe the one. So I'm sure, and I'm without a doubt, there's going to be an argument of trying to the bottom line, in terms of doing that. But if you keep on producing your great players at the academy level, and you keep on trying to market your brand, why wouldn't you be able to utilize that as a reason? Now, I know they have an affiliate now, and obviously I think they've gotten to the girls' DA, which is another night for another conversation.
Story. Yeah, that's another topic.
but you look at clubs like that, and you realize that that's where you actually should be able to utilize another weekend to brand your product. And why not do it with 45% of the playing population, right? So so there's a lot of reasons behind it. I think you have to give credit where credit is due, and the owners and Pulse and everyone out in Portland have done a really good job in growing that product organically, and understanding that there's a market for it, and catering to a different market necessarily. So it's not just saying it's a Timbers. A Thorn themselves actually aren't the same fans. There's some crossover, but it's amazing to know that there's at least 10,000 of those 20,000 people that are die-hard Thorn fans, right? They're not, and don't get me wrong.
Well, they've marketed to a specific demographic, which honestly needs to be like
utilized across the country.
It needs to be utilized across the country.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I think in a few months ago, Don Garber had said, he expects a lot of the franchises now to start doing that, because I think it's not just about the men. It's, again, we're here talking about the game, and I know we have an angle talking about the women's game, but really this is an angle that's about growing the game
sport,
of soccer, and I think that's what we're passionate about, and I think that's what people sometimes fail to forget when you start talking about the women's game.
Terry, I got a question for you.
Sure, Dutchie.
Along the MLS stuff.
Okay.
We got rid of Chivas USA.
Right.
And everyone said what a bad thing that was, that we would bring a club, copy another club, or bring a farm team from another club. And the next team we bought was New York City.
Right.
Football club.
Man City.
Right.
Manchester City, that's all we did. So, the MLS is getting way better, and they make a huge mistake, and then it seems they try to rectify that mistake with making a mistake. What do you think about the bringing in teams that are farm teams or copycat teams?
One word: money. $150 million I think the last time they said for a MLS franchise fee, the owners who own Man City are obviously Sheikh Mansour, or what I can't remember his name is, but part of
it's a tax write-off for him.
But you look at it, right? So the royal family, but you look at these billionaires that own if you look at what they're doing with their brand actually involves owning Melbourne City, the men's team. They actually own their women's team program. Their women's program, Man City, has grown, and it's another extension of their brand in America. So I think the bottom line is can they continue to grow their brand during this process, and what other place to do it than the fastest growing in terms of population and popularity than to do it in the United States.
So MLS will sell out to anyone with money?
I didn't. Possibly.
All right, we'll leave the MLS topic for another night. So news broke this week of Alex Morgan, who, for those of you that don't know who Alex Morgan is, she's one of the key women's national team members, and she's actually, I think she played around here. I think she grew up and played for Cerritos, kind of played for a smaller soccer club and came through and went to Cal. She's actually leaving the NWSL and going to Lyon. So what do you think about that, and how does that help or hurt the NWSL? How does it affect Alex Morgan? Like, is that good for the game? Is it good for women in the sport?
I think it's great for her to go and experience European football. Obviously, I've spent some time there myself, and I think this passion is growing. Lyon has always been very, very serious about their women's program, and I think she noted that being able to play in the Champions League against the best players in the world, arguably, over there is something that's challenged her. So great for her for stepping outside her comfort zone, and you kind of wish all players would kind of do that at some point. I think, like everything else, she's not necessarily one of those who, I can't speak and say it's about finances, but in the day it plays a role. But I don't think that was probably her motivation. I think her motivation is definitely to be able to kind of test where she is as a player against arguably some of the better players in the world. And I think that's also bodes well to hopefully go back to where the WPS was, where we can start luring some of the best players in the world back over here, not at the expense of taking spots from American players, but raising the level of play by bringing in the best Japanese player, the best German player, the best Brazilian player,
Marta.
I mean, and again, having worked with her and seeing her on a daily basis, it raises the level because she brings a different mentality. So I think that it's only good for her, and I think it'd only be great for her when she comes back to be able to share some of that with her teammates.
Right. And I think the timing of it, if she's going to leave, it's probably a good time to go now, just based on where she's at in her career, and also the timing with the World Cup cycles and everything like that. And, I know Lindsey Horan and Tobin Heath, they played at where, PSG?
Yeah, when PSG, I think both Lindsay was at Lyon. That's correct. Horan was at Lyon.
Oh, she was at Lyon?
Yeah, she was at Lyon.
Oh. Okay. I thought they were both at PSG. I don't know. Right. Anyways, they were in France.
They're in France.
They're playing in France and playing in Champions League, and they came back, I think, at least the year before the World Cup, or I think Lindsay came back in 2015 or something. But so I mean, it's good, and in the article that I read, it kind of mentioned, it touched on the fact that the women's national team is suing the federation right now, and there might be some funny stuff with contracts and things like that, and who knows where the NWSL is going to go with the federation funding.
Yeah, it's a tricky one,
and all that stuff, and I hope they work it out. Obviously, as a female, I feel very passionate about equal pay. I understand the finances, but I read somewhere that the women's team is actually going to gross $5 million for the federation, and the men's team this year is losing money.
Ouch.
And if you looked at the friendlies that were hosted in 2016, the attendance for the women outdrew the men, which it's that argument of, okay, money talks, but then when you have statistics of the Women's World Cup was more viewed than the Men's World Cup, and, the budgets are this and that. So, for me, it's
the bottom line doesn't lie.
Yeah, exactly. And, I wish the women's national team the best in their fight in the lawsuit. I mean, I hate to see a strike. I really would hate to see a strike, because I think it would set the women's game back a little bit. But if they do decide to strike, I fully support it as a female coach, and it's the disparity is there.
Right.
It's there, and
I agree.
It's there. And you mentioned, you mentioned today the Canadian women's national team just.
Yeah, they just became
unionized.
unionizers, right, as well. And, some of those players, and you look at, as a Canadian, you look back at people like pioneers like Charmaine Hooper and Andrea Neal.
I remember playing against her. She was scary.
Hooper
was a beast.
She still is fit as well.
That woman.
Yeah,
I played against her years ago, and she scared me.
Yeah, she's, and you look at that particular time, and you think about the sacrifices they made, and think of going into competition, and when you hear that they were promised things by the federation in 2008 to go to China, and they never got what they were deserved. Literally, no bonuses, no extra money for participating in the Olympics, the biggest sporting event in the world. It's a tragedy, and we all know that athletes and Olympians live at the poverty line. Anyways, it's for
most of them do.
Most of them do.
Unless you're Michael Phelps and you've won 26 medals.
Absolutely.
You've got an Under Armour deal and all that.
The disparity is huge.
Or you're LeBron James with 32 Twitter followers.
Bolt. Don't forget my man
Usain Bolt.
Don't forget my man Bolt.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just such a disparity that you just want athletes to be able to do what they love, and be able to represent their countries accordingly.
So here's you can answer this or not, but should LA have a women's pro team?
LA, of course, should have a women's pro team. And, first of all, it's been amazing to see the landscape change in the last few months. The Galaxy getting a DA, I believe, obviously, LAFC is getting has partnered with a local club to do something as well. And so why not have two women's pro teams in LA? I think there'll be one. It'll be interesting to see who goes first, and why not something in San Diego? Soccer in San Diego is huge, so why not something in San Diego as well? So listen, we're always going to push for
absolutely
for women's a pro team across the country, but I think for the second largest market in the country not to have at least one, I don't see why not.
So you were involved with the LA Soul when they were here. Is there anything from an insider's point of view that you would
sworn to secrecy?
You're sworn to secrecy. You can't talk about it.
No.
Is there any lesson learned from a strategic standpoint that you could say, if LA gets a franchise again, we need to do or this needs to be done or this needs to be thought about?
I think. Yeah, there's a lot. To
I know that's
at.
That's a loaded question.
It's a lot.
But
and to be respectful, obviously, of someone like Martha, because she put, as they say, she put bums in the seats. But I think, for what, I think it's pretty public knowledge of what the league paid out for her. They probably could have got her for half the price.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a start in terms of overall budgets of why that club didn't go. But I think, like everything else, I think. Timing is an amazing thing in life,
yeah.
and sometimes I think that the timing coming out of a recession, in 2009, it was a little bit different in 2008.
I didn't even think about that.
And so you look about some of those things, and the country is still trying to stabilize. So I think, to put a positive spin on it, I think sometimes the timing of that league, but credit, you look at some of the clubs, the Washingtons and the Western New Yorks and all these other clubs and the Chicagos who kind of still have been plugging away from
right.
around those early years. You have to kind of give them credit for those things, because it hasn't been easy, and those people who've invested have lost a lot of money, and I think they should be acknowledged. But I think the game, again, it's on an uprise, and so I'd rather, if someone's to say to me now, I would rather definitely look on not so much the past, but what can we do? But I think the timing is good, and I think the big thing I would look now is the co-branding, and I think in LA, even though we had affiliation with the Galaxy,
Right.
And had great facilities and everything else, if that MLS club truly owns that,
Yeah.
it's a different.
Well, yeah, because
fish.
you can piggyback the ticketing and all the
Absolutely,
marketing and
absolutely.
all of those shared staffs that you
cross
can.
branding is
Yeah.
very, very important. So I think that is the difference now between what had happened there is in the clubs like the Houstons and the Portlands and the Orlandos do a very good job
Right.
of promoting that now. So I think it's about looking ahead, and I think it's about looking at what clubs can do to really look, I don't know all the answers. I'm just saying that's the first thing that I would say to anyone of these clubs, and I have spoken to different clubs, MLS clubs, and those sort of questions have come up. But I think they've done their own research. They're smart people, and they've done their own kind of surveys in these cities, from what I've known, and everyone's looking to do it. And when they talk about facilities, Real Salt Lake, they're another club that have actively said this is what we're going to look to do in the next couple of years. They haven't shied away from it, and it's based on their overall brand and growing the game
Right.
in Utah, and I think that's just very positive.
Right. So just kind of going to a little bit different topic here. You've now moved to Southern California. You've brought
I did
Seattle
not bring
and Vancouver weather
the most
with
rain
you.
that you've said in the
last 2 years.
I know.
Yeah.
In the last
So
week.
So
thanks
you're here.
to me.
You're here working for an all girls club, and you and I have had some chats about the importance of having female coaches coaching girls, and you've always been an advocate for women in the game, and you know, in Seattle you had a female assistant. You and I have worked together. How important is it for young girls, and even college girls or whatever, of girls having female coaches somewhere along the line?
Yeah, I think like everything else, it comes down to the quality of the individual. Like, in the day, it's about equality, but it's an opportunity, but it's about having the right people. And then I've actively always had a woman assistant work with me. I think it's important. There's a dynamics there that we need to kind of always appreciate. But again, it's just really about the quality. It's one thing. You can't just be a female and not know your stuff. So that's always been the good. You've known your stuff. You've quality. And when in Seattle, I obviously had Zara Lachek, and she was very, very good. National Coach of the Year, A licensed coach. My current staff now, we have Terry Patrell, you coach at Arizona State, A licensed coach. We've got another person that has just come on board to help with our ECNL program. I think you might know it pretty well. But the bottom line is that, it's really about bringing quality people on board who can provide an insight, having come through the ranks as a youth player, a teenager, college player, and provide an insight that I'll never be able to, because there are some...
There are differences.
There are differences.
Anyone that tells you there aren't any differences between boys and girls or men and women,
absolutely.
I'm sorry. Like, there are differences.
There are differences, and so I think
there's a lot of similarities, but there are differences.
Right, and sometimes, I hate to say it, but as men, we don't get everything. We sometimes miss some cues along the way that I think everyone will probably tell you, and that we don't, some of the things we don't pick up on as much. And I would definitely say my women assistants are a little more aware of some things, in tune to some things.
Women read body language and tone a lot differently than men.
I'm a lot better than I would be 10 years ago for sure, but I think there's some things that you definitely want. But I think being able to empower and provide quality role models, especially in a youth club, by having good women and female coaches, is vitally important, especially at the younger ages.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, and like I said, you've always been an advocate for women in the game, so that's awesome to have, because there have been times where I was talking to a guy, Dutchie, you were there the other day down in San Diego when we were sat at the table, and there was a guy that told me women don't have the temperament to coach boys.
Was that the time when you went off on him?
I did go off on him. Yeah. So, for me, that's the key. Like, with DOCs and university presidents, it's sometimes you have to open up the pool, and you can't just look at, you can't just look down one road. It's really important to give good young coaches and female coaches and Latino coaches and black coaches and wherever you're from.
Think outside the box.
Yeah, diversity. And that's the one thing, I don't want to talk politics, but Canada has a very, diverse cabinet, and it's almost like you look at a soccer club and you want to have that same melting pot. You want to have you definitely want to have that differences of opinions and differences of backgrounds and cultures, and
it is. It's about society. Why wouldn't you want it? Because in the day, regardless of where you are demographically, you want your kids to be well rounded. The very essence of why you put your kids in sports is to teach them these things, and quality and fairness and being open minded to things is something that it's only going to help them and assist them in down the line.
Right. So is there anything that you specifically want to talk about? I've kind of hit most of my questions on the pro level. Do you want to talk about Jamaica? Do you want to talk about
I would definitely. I think it was a whole other evening to talk about your SoCal.
The SoCal
soccer scene is wow. It's a little bit.
Are you in culture shock here?
I wouldn't say culture shock, because I think the one thing about this game is taught me, and just life, is nothing should ever surprise you with anything, especially with youth sports.
As a coach, always be flexible.
Always be
flexible.
But I think the idea of some of the things I've seen, especially what's really been interesting to me is parents and how they kind of interact, because I think it's, it's one thing to hold your colleague, at a different level and say, hey, we should have a higher standard of how we conduct themselves. But then you turn around, you think, parents in the day, you put your kids in sports and you put them in environments that you would hope that you would entrust them to be with the right quality people. And one of the things I found incredible is, and I was speaking to a parent about this the other day, and I said, why do you tolerate that coach yelling at your kid for 70 minutes? And I said, if you were in a classroom, you were to walk in, your teacher would be screaming at your kid.
Do your math faster. Add quicker.
What would you do?
That's wrong.
It's unbelievable. Move that equation here. Move that equation. Don't do that. Don't.
Yeah.
And you see it all the time. And I sit there as an observer thinking, why do you tolerate that? Why would you allow for your child, regardless of gender, to be verbally abused like that by any individual, considering that does not go on in your own home?
Right.
It's baffling to me.
Yeah.
And it seems like, and maybe it's just here, but I thought, why would you be upset anyways? The sun is shining. It's a beautiful weather. Why are people so angry?
Why
are you so angry to be yelling at these kids? Just sit back and relax. But it's like, it just baffles me to see the behavior of, it's one thing to be, again, our colleagues acting wrong, you have a word, but it's one thing to say as a parent, why do you tolerate that? And yet, in this crazy time of year and tryouts, you go around and you see people going to different places and organizations where coaches have that reputation, and they're still putting their money coaching.
They're still coaching.
Well, first of all, that's a whole other.
Well, it's not even coaching. It's yelling.
Coaching,
it's
right?
bullying.
Right.
It's
And the reason behind it is because that team is successful, and so I think that's a whole other.
Yeah, it's
evening.
Actually,
it's a whole other
is.
Evening.
And in January, I'm gonna have Reed Maltby on. He's writing a book and has a talk about. It's called Echoes Beyond the Game. And he talks about the use of words and how negative words actually chemically impact your brain. So like using, 6 positives to a negative actually have a positive impact on your brain. And that, makes a player less anxious, and that gets, higher level performance, and, their touch is better because they're not tense, because they're not like having all these hormones. And
you can't yell at a horse then expect them to obey a whisper.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah, I got a lot of those.
I like that. That's a good one. Yeah. So that is another topic, for sure, about the word choice and everything. So we're gonna go to a commercial right now, Dutchie. We good?
Yeah, we're good. We're gonna go to commercial. We'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, Dutchie.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's been on the phone the whole time.
You know your guest is still on the phone.
Hey, do you want me to hang up?
No, you're good.
Gary,
All right, 30 seconds. We're back live. So all quiet.
Sarah, are you there?
Yes.
When the normal BS just won't do. chaoticradio.com.
And welcome back to Chaotic Radio. We're tuned in to Women Talking Football. We're going to... Sarah, you're still on the line, right? We got to include Sarah. Sorry about that. we're going to switch gears and talk about the women's college game a little bit. We just had the College Cup a couple weeks ago up in Northern Cal. So we're going to talk about UNC and West Virginia and Georgetown and USC, and just talk about, you know, how it is to be a college athlete and the great I'm at loss for words, there's parity now.
Yeah,
there's parity now because it's awesome to see. You know, UNC is usually always in the mix, but we had West Virginia, which has a bunch of Canadian national team players on it, which is fantastic. Six Canadian national team players on West Virginia. So shout out to Nikki Izzo Brown as the head coach. We had Georgetown, who had never gotten that far, who I'm very proud to say one of my Dana High School girls, Megan Shaver, was a sophomore there and had a great experience. And then we had the local Southern Cal team, USC.
Shout out to Kadani.
Which is awesome. So, Sarah, did you watch any of the women's Final Four? Or College Cup, as it's called? Oh.
We're going to call her back right now.
Okay, she hung up. Yeah. Hubie, tell me about it. You were there, weren't you?
I was, and I survived the frost.
How was it?
It was cold. It was a little bit cold. But I would definitely say, you know, again, a great testament, great venue. Obviously, the first day, the you know, speak about the venue was moved from North Carolina based on those issues,
some politics,
some issues going there. So usually when those college cups happen, they happen in and around a showcase event. So that would have probably brought the attendance up for sure. But great to see. You know, people show up in droves on the Sunday. So from that standpoint, and support was very good. But yeah, I think, again, another great testament to teams and programs that continue to build. Again, you know, we talk about a little bit about diversity. There's a lot of diversity on both sides with the women, and, you know, obviously it's great to see you know, minority head coach that sometimes you don't really get the opportunities to coach at that level, but overall it's really about providing people with opportunities, and Kadani, and credit to him and his coaching staff, and, you know, they does a good job of everyone that I know, my players that have played for Kadani talks and raves about him as a great people person. So yeah, credit to him, and credit to his program for winning a national championship.
That's awesome. It looks like we have a phone call. Yeah.
Yeah, we got Sarah back on the line.
We got Sarah back on the line. Awesome. Sarah, so we were just talking about the women's college Final Four. Did you get a chance to watch any of it? Or not?
I think you fell asleep. It's 2 o'clock in the morning.
We're going to not worry about Sarah. Yeah, so I had a struggle with the women's college Final Four in that I came home from coaching and I sat down to watch it, and it was only on ESPNU, and apparently
you got to up that package, Carrie.
Apparently, my Cox Communications, I don't get ESPNU, so I was like so bummed out that it wasn't on just regular ESPN.
You need the bundle.
Well, you know what? Like the women's Division I college final for football should be on ESPN or NBC or whatever. So to me, I was, you know, hacked off at the media again, you know.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Then, you know, again, a great game. You know, a little bit. You know, credit again to West Virginia. I thought, you know, it was kind of a tale of two halves, but they did well, and you know, kind of took the game a little bit to USC, and you know, USC cut off, you know, the great start, and then like everything else, it's natural. You're going to go through these waves of pressure and sustained pressure from West Virginia to try to equalize, and they did a really good job of doing so. Ashley Lawrence, Canadian international, scores a great goal, and then USC comes down literally right after that on a little bit of a counter and scores another one to go ahead. So overall, just great to see. Again, the number of people in the stands on a cold day, but they're out supporting both schools and alumni from far and near to come in, support the game, and you know, again, the bigger picture just shows how great, or goes to show how the game continues to grow.
Yeah. Dutchie, did you watch the women's soccer final? No. Sarah, did you watch the women's college Final Four or college
I
cup?
did not get.
College cup,
I
as
did
we
not
have to
get
call
watch
it.
as much as I wanted to.
Yeah.
Cup.
We have to call it the
Unfortunately, so
College
it's
Cup
good.
because basketball, what is it? Basketball owns the rights to the name.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's like a trademark issue within the NCAA.
Yeah. And
That's,
Frozen
that's
Fours for
another
hockey.
topic.
Yeah, it's a whole nother
Other
topic.
topic about paid athletes.
Yeah,
for
we could
things.
talk about that for days.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, I mean, UNC's had a dynasty for forever. I mean, Anson's just an amazing advocate and coach, and it seems like UNC's always in it. I mean, what do they go, like 14 years straight or something of winning it, or some ungodly ungodly number.
Anyone who's coached at any level will know how difficult that is.
Yeah, like the sustained excellence.
Absolutely.
But I really enjoyed having, teams that a lot of people don't think of necessarily as a soccer powerhouse. And it's just, to me, it was amazing. Like, I was rooting for Georgetown because one of my high school players played there, and she actually got recruited in December of her senior year, which is, as you know, super late nowadays.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, it's like, oh, you got to decide by your sophomore.
Grade 8s, grade 9s on the radar.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's insane. And she went there and like played as a freshman, and she didn't play in the Final Four because she was hurt, but she just had this like tremendous experience. And how many players can say that they played, were on a team in the Division I,
especially
Final
knowing
Four.
How late she got recruited to
exactly.
the school.
So big shout out to Megan Shaver and Georgetown.
Big shout out to you too, Coach.
So Sarah, talk to us about the college women's game.
Which part?
Anything you want to. First of all, where did you play college?
A long time ago, I played at Smith College and at the University of Denver for a year.
Awesome.
Been a while. I think, like what you said, I love seeing that there's. UNC had such a dynasty for so long, and that you can go into so many reasons about that. I love seeing that we're seeing new faces in it, and I think that's great. I love that. It isn't just, you see some of the usual suspects every year, but you start to see new ones popping in, and that's, I think, a credit to the depth of the women's game across the U.S., and that, to me, is exciting. It's nothing against UNC, but I love seeing, the first time they didn't win. I was thrilled, just because it meant that there were so many more players of that caliber.
There's a chance for someone else to win.
Great.
Yeah. And, the one thing... the one thing that I think that could be a good topic of discussion that maybe we can chat about is, all of these youth players that we have that, that are in our clubs or that we deal with on a daily basis. It seems like all of them are like, oh yeah, I want to play Division I soccer. But do they actually know the trials and tribulations and the work that goes in? I mean, I forget who I was talking to the other day, but I was talking to Linda Hamilton, who played at UNC and was a former coach of mine, and she coaches a Division III program now, and I coached a Division III and was a Division I assistant, and it's like, you have to live, eat, and breathe the game to play Division I soccer. And I think that's one thing that, for me as a club director, I want to educate the players that, you might not want to play Division I soccer. You might want to go play D2 or D3 or NAIA or junior college, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing at all, no.
There's nothing wrong with that, and you can get school paid for, and you can have a great experience, and you can win a national championship at those other levels.
And, the other part, too, again, we talk about the holistic growth of players and why that's so important, but, so you can allude to this about just the idea of the academics again. I feel like trying to educate parents that 75%
of the money
you get can actually come from academics, and the fact that they everything's talking about scholarships and everyone's walking in saying I want a full ride, $80,000
doesn't happen
UCLA,
very often,
and you're like I don't think you should be fishing in that water at this particular moment, but Sarah, what do you find, like, going even for that process in your early days of your recruiting process? How did you even decide to go to Smith and then transfer to Denver? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh gosh, that was so long ago. I think recruiting then was really, I mean, that was, you're looking at early 90s.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with the early 90s.
Nothing wrong with the 90s. We need to
No,
get
there's
some
not.
90s hip-hop on here right
My
about
flannel
now.
shirts and grunge are great. It's very different. I think watching for my first year out of college is probably the best way to describe it. We're still doing mail merge documents and VHS tapes,
Oof.
and looking at schools your senior year, and now it's a completely different animal. But I think the biggest thing that I see, like what you said, is everyone's so hung up on, we've paid a lot of money for club soccer. We've paid to go to tournaments. We've paid for the individual trainers. We've paid for the clubs. So we want a return on our investment. And a lot of the parents really think they're going to get that back. But then when you start to, giving college talks, run the numbers of what a fully funded program actually can provide and the average roster size, and if it's divided up evenly, which it's not, and then they start to realize that, oh, okay, so that full ride is really not as possible solely through academic money, and then that there really is a lot more, solely through athletic money. There is a lot more academic money available out there. And I think just educating the parents earlier on that really is, it opens up options. And the stronger academic this player has, the more options they have. If a school even is fully funded but can only give them a couple $1,000s a year, if they're getting a lot of academic money, well, that goes a long way. And to me, that's important, as well as the education. That Division I is great for some athletes. It's the absolute perfect fit. But I have there's a young man that I work with. He's a senior this year. He just committed to a D3 school, and he's absolutely over the moon. It's a great fit for him. Academically, the school culture is exactly what he's looking for. And so, the parents kind of saw past the scholarships and found the right place for him. And I think that's so important.
Yeah, and I want to I definitely want to have Sam Weber on the show at some point to talk about profile passer, because one of our friends has a very new business, and there's a lot of people that are in the recruiting business for the wrong reasons, but she's developed some things that are pretty cool. So we'll have that on as a topic at some point. But yeah, I mean, I think, the biggest thing is, again, we always talk about educating and communicating, but talking about the benefits of the different levels of the different schools with the parents and with the kids. And I think, that needs to be a conversation between the coach and the kid and the parent.
Absolutely.
Because I often feel like in the discussions that I have, it's like the parents are like, well, we want to do this. And it's like, wait. We,
right.
Yes, you might be paying for a large part of it, but you need to talk to your kid, and your kid might not have any interest in playing beyond, beyond their high school age years, or they might be burnt out, or they might, want to play at a D3 school and get like a, lesser time invested scenario. I think it's, that's where some of those real honest conversations need to happen. And from a recruiting standpoint for clubs, we were talking about this earlier. It's like a lot of, quote unquote hashtag pretenders out there will be like, come play for me because I'll get you a college scholarship. It's like, me personally, I've never gotten anyone a college scholarship. Obviously, the player had a lot to do with that.
A lot.
You can help, you can communicate, you can introduce, you can guide, but like, I would never go out on a limb and go, oh yeah, hey, I got this player a college scholarship. Right. Like, are you joking me? And
I also think, just on that note, Carrie, I think the one thing that I find all the time as well is that, within our profession, is that we're all involved in the club game, is that, directors and coaches, they're never honest enough with those players. They never have the conversation of saying, like I said, you're not quite, I mean, we all have the conversation where someone said, oh, I should be playing at UCLA or Stanford or UNC, and you're like, I don't know where or how you thought, and then you go, but yet you said to them,
let's look at the rest of your list,
right? And,
let's go,
They list these 10 schools, and then you ask them, and you ask their families, have you ever watched a game at that level? And especially around this area, I find it absolutely baffling to me in my short time that I've been here, when you have those conversations of kids who are coming up to me and their parents saying where they want to go to school, and I said, down the I-5, 405. Have you gone to USC and UCLA or
have you gone to Cal State Fullerton or UC Irvine?
Have you gone to any of these games in this area and watched any of that level? And it's and Pepperdine or whatever the case may be. There's so many schools in this area, similar to obviously in New York. And you're going, have you taken in a game yet? No. And it's like, well, you need to be able to watch the game to understand that level. And then I think then you can set some realistic expectations, because the truth is there is a place for you to play. It's just probably sometimes not where you want to go. And then what it is that you want to study. I want to go to this school, and then
there you go. They don't have engineering. They don't have
anything that you want to study.
They don't have art or graphic design, and the kids go, "Oh, okay, what am I going to do?"
Yeah, so it is, and I think that is again upon us, and I keep on reiterating the fact that I think the responsibility and good ethical people in the game to be able to say that it comes down from clubs and administrators and coaches who be able to provide that. And so, we have to hold our colleagues to a higher standard as well, to be able to say to these kids and not send them down the wrong path and promise them things that don't happen, because I know it's unfortunately, it just never works out the way it is. And then we always become the bad guys, but someone across the street, someone across the street is going to tell them what it should do. But again, in the best interest of these players, it doesn't change. And I'm sure you going through the same thing over there on that side, even with the boys,
Yeah, they have definitely, even at the junior college level, there's a few that are thinking they're going to move on to a top-tier Division I, or what they consider a top-tier D1. And, the reality of it is, it's not just level of play, it's also the discipline, the commitment. And you may be an amazing player who can play at that level, but if you really want to have a certain major or travel abroad for a year, then maybe it's better looking at a different program and kind of taking that all into account as you're making your college choice. But if you're making that as a sophomore in high school, it's a little hard to think 6 years down the line.
Yeah, and I have a philosophical issue, and I'm not in the college game anymore, so I guess I can say this as an outsider, but Jiminy Christmas, how do we ask ninth graders to tell people where they want to go to college? Like, oh my
gosh, they don't even know what they're doing next week, let alone in
they don't even know what they're wearing to school the next day, let alone where they want to go to college. And I apologize to all my friends that are college coaches out there, because I get it. Like, if you don't do it, then the next person's going to do it, and then they're going to get a kid, and you're going to have to play against the kid rather than have them on your team. And I get that. But, can we stop the madness? Like, it just baffles me. It absolutely baffles me.
The stress level that you hear from the parents and the kids that, oh my gosh, I'm starting my junior year and I don't know where I'm going. And I'm like, that's okay. Or it should be okay. Yeah. But,
And that's where, like,
it's a little out of control.
Yeah, it's out of control.
And that's where, like, again, I'm so excited that Megan Shaver, who I had the opportunity to work with, I mean, she committed to Georgetown after the Disney showcase of her senior year, and it worked out. It worked out for her. She's had a great experience. She loves it. She loves the school. She went to the final
academic school.
She went to the Final Four, and it's like, I want to talk about those stories, and I want people to, understand that, like, you don't necessarily have to make a very, very, very early decision. You can slow down the process, and you can make an educated decision on where you actually want to go to school, because I think that, I would love to see the statistics on the number of kids that transfer.
So true.
Because I think that, I would love to see, like, a study of when kids commit and how that affects whether or not they transfer. Because I think the numbers of transfers have gone up. I mean, at least since I was back coaching years and years ago in college, I think the transfer rate is a lot bigger now. And to me, it would make sense. It would be a logical correlation of early decisions versus the transfer rate. But
I'd be curious to see the transfer rate comparison between the men's and the women's side, because with the women's timetable being that much faster than the men's timetable for decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking on our Facebook Live, and I just want to give a shout out. One of my former players, Alan Abity, is calling, and I think it's her birthday today. So she actually is in a PT doctorate program at Alabama, and she played college soccer at Nova Southeastern. So if you can see us, Alan, happy birthday.
Alan, I got a problem with my right ankle here. Can you help me out?
She's good. She's good. She's an intelligent young leader, and she's going to rock
Sure
out
she
everything
is.
that she does.
Great.
So, sorry. That was a side story. I got, something shiny.
Something shiny.
My attention span was a little short there. Yeah. So, I mean, Sarah, how do you guys place the men at the junior college? How do you work with other college programs to get them to a 4-year school? How do you work that?
A lot of that really depends on their academics, which has been a little bit different and a bit of a wake-up call for me, being used to schools where there was, even at Division III or other places where there was academic support. It's a little bit different. We don't have the academic support staff that you necessarily like to see, so
Right.
I think a lot of them really
Struggle a
depends
bit?
on, it depends on where they end up being academically. We can kind of push and try to help as much as we can, but it really is up to them. There's a lot more independence and a lot more falls directly on their shoulders than it might at another kind of a 4-year school. Some of them aren't interested. Some of them want their 2-year degree, they're done and they're out, and it's really kind of on a case-by-case basis whether they want to get the highest grades that they can at the 2-year school, get in somewhere, and then stop playing and focus on that, which for some of them is a very good choice because academically, dealing with second languages and second languages learned late, it can be a bit more of a challenge. We do try to connect them. We have some players who are looking for next year, and it's really finding that fit with the level that we are. Most of them are probably looking at either transferring to D3s or some of the D2s in the area. There's a chance. We had a player who'd be a tremendous D1 player. Oh, my goodness. But his discipline wasn't one that we could have recommended him to, and academically he struggled. So it's really case by case. Okay. But I hope they go on.
Dutchie, you hear that? Paul Gascoigne.
What?
I said, Dutchie there, Paul Gascoigne. There's a name, undisciplined.
Poor guy.
Name from the past.
Yeah, he liked his beer a little too much there.
Little. Just a little.
Unfortunately.
Great footballer, though. Great footballer.
Yeah.
I think we're dating ourselves with references to Paul. We are dating ourselves. Paul Gascoigne.
Yeah. We're all in our 40s here, so I hate to say that.
Gascoigne,
You're not supposed to tell anyone that.
Sorry. Hey, I'm fabulous and 44. I will own it all day long.
Fine wine. Wine.
All day long.
Fine wine.
So, Hubie, you talked about, in working with the Seattle Sounders women and, at one time for the Whitecaps, how you touched on the fact that a lot of times you had college players come in and they were allowed to play in a different environment. And then how did that transfer back to their college teams or, the quote unquote, like more professional, supposedly professional environment? Like talk about getting those college players in and then, having that as a bridge between maybe national team call-ups or different things like that.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, 2 years ago exactly, I had a player, it's a great story. I had a player named Simone Calander, and she played at University of Minnesota. She wanted to come to my program, and I asked her, and all the players that come into me, I kind of ask them for 5 reasons why you want to give up your summer and come here and play. And I kind of, after I convince them, or I think it's a good fit, that's not going to rain for the entire summer, while they're there, they decide to come in. And Simone Calander is in the recent times, one of the best stories, I think. And so Simone Calander, and long story short, she comes into me and she gets off to a great start. Start some games, score some goals. In her conference, Janelle Flaws is an all-time scorer at Illinois. She comes in and her goals, and she comes a little bit late, has to earn her time off the bench, but then she comes in and scores like a hat trick in 7 minutes, and then continues to earn her spot and keeps her and puts Simone on the bench. And so towards the end of the season, we have a conversation of where we're going, and Simone wants feedback, and I said, "Do you think you've improved this summer?" She says, "Yeah, I do." And I said, "So you're just gauging this summer," I said, whether we win championships or not, you're playing against the Rose Lavals, the Callie Farquharson, the Mackenzie Berryhills, Alex Arlets, all those people I just named that year now are playing in the NWSL. And so I said, if you're going to come in and train, understand that the environment, listen, coaching is subjective. I'm not here to say I'm the best coach, but I said the environment that you create is what allows you to become a better player. And I said, you won't know how good you've improved until you leave here. So Simone Calander comes off the bench for me, plays well, starts some game. I would definitely say she was in my starting 11. I think honest to say that. She goes back that season and wins the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year. And against,
That's a good story.
Against
That's good.
the player like Flaws, who goes in there as the All-American, and she goes in, becomes All-American, and she continues on this path. Big Ten Player of the Year, NSCA All-American, and now she's going into senior year. Had a great year. Minnesota wins the Big Ten, and she's going in the year. She's on the map, on the radar, and hopefully she gets drafted by the NWSL franchise. And so, over even 4 months, just dedicating yourself and understanding that putting yourself in the right environment for these college kids gives them an edge. And I said, you just won't know until you go back to school, because you're playing against some of the best kids. And you go back and you're being tested, and every day it's a grind, and every day some of the conditions, the adversity that you're being put through, and
you're out of your comfort zone.
You left Minnesota, and you're in Seattle, and you're dealing with all these things, but you're also around a culture where you can pass Obafemi Martins and Clint Dempsey in the halls, and people are starstruck in the training room, and people are taking selfies in the background and photobombing players, and you have to say, stop, that's not nice. It's not professional to end up while Clint Dempsey's on the bike to be taking photos of him all the time. But the reality is it breeds that culture. It breeds what is important, and the players go back and do so well. And I couldn't be more proud of her for sticking through it, because I'm sure there's some days she wanted to be like, I'm just going to go back to Minnesota and train. But I think those are the things that you're always really proud of, because you just know that with a little bit of insight. And again, I can't take credit for any of it. It's about the kid and her perseverance. But you understand what it is that she's going through. You understand that these are some of the I dare to say, the good stressors, the ones that are going to push you to become better, and the revelation that you come through it is something that you take on for the rest of your life. And I think that's ultimately why we're all in this game, because it's just such a rewarding thing to see people accomplish, and young people accomplish their goals,
Yeah.
Great.
Sarah, did you ever play after college in the what was it back then? The WISL or WSW, the Whistle?
The original was the WUSA, but it wasn't when I graduated. Not
the semi-pro.
I think I was at that.
The USWISL.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
That one, no.
USWISL. Francisco?
I did not.
Yeah. I remember I played for the Columbus Zigs.
Zogs.
The men's team were the Zogs.
Oh,
the women's team were the Zigs.
Right.
Gotcha.
We were the Zigs, and I'm trying to remember the women on the team. John Lipsitz was the coach, and I remember.
Oh my gosh.
Like that.
You're dating yourself.
I am dating myself, and then I played 1 year for the Kentucky Phillies, and back in that time, I remember. No one got paid. They didn't even pay for our food. And I remember specifically one time, and this is what the women's game, and the men's game too at the lower levels is like. I remember specifically driving in my little Geo Metro from Ann Arbor to Chicago to go play in a game. Yeah. And at the end of the season, the owner was like, "Here's $20 for gas. Will that be enough?" And I'm looking at him like, I don't even want to talk to you, and I'm playing for the love of the game.
Yeah, and you know what? It builds, and you're here telling this story 20 years later. It builds character, and you remember those things that are very, very, they're humbling, but they drive you, and it's a part of that passion that you take on 20 years out. And you're right. It's not for the money. No. It is strictly for the love of the game and the ability now to be able to take some of that and pass that back on is phenomenal for all of us,
Yeah, I'm sure you can share some stories about.
That's a whole
nother show. The pro leagues.
Me having to sneak out of a hotel in Portugal because my agent wouldn't pay the bill after we decided not to sign for them. That's a different story altogether.
The woes of pros.
Yeah, definitely.
behind.
So Sarah, quick question, just going a little bit back to the club. What's the long term? Share some of your plans for your club vision. I mean, obviously we're in the game. What's your kind of club? How big is your club? First of all, how many players do you have?
We are a fairly small club. Most of our age groups have one team in it. The older ones play in the NPL. The younger ones play in a U.S. club league. It's called the New York Club League at this point.
Right.
With all the alphabet soup that's going on out there and some
all the
changes
acronyms
around here.
Yeah.
So we have it's a smaller club. I forget exactly the number. We have one at each age group, and a few age groups have two, where they've added another team in. Some have come over to us as teams. My first year with them, so I'm still kind of learning my way around there a little bit. But it's been a really interesting experience with different dynamics on staff, which has been kind of refreshing. So
that's good. That's good. And diverse. Is it diverse staff where you are? Or?
Yeah, it is actually. We've got coaches from, I can't name all the countries. Definitely a few from England because it's the U.S., so that tends to be what we get. We have a coach from, I believe, Peru and some other places. On my team, though, what's quite interesting is I have a young player who's come from France, another one whose family is from Spain, another one whose family is from Peru, like first generation over, moved within the last few years. We have another player who's, so it's kind of a mix on there, which is actually kind of fun. A couple of them make comments on that one day, like, our team is really kind of from all over. I'm like, yes, it is. Isn't that neat? I think it's great. And another player is actually families from Mexico. So
that is great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
It adds to that flavor,
and pretty cool.
Yeah, and adds to that flavor and that diversity, and to bring stories in. I'm sure they've some fantastic, stories they can share from the home country in terms of what real passion is, and derbies and parents growing up and grandparents loving it, supporting a team, and you have no other choice but to support that team. You know how that goes, So that's great. That's
Absolutely.
Great.
So how do we get more player diversity on the women's side? Because I feel as if you look at the men's game within club and college even, I feel like there's more diversity within the players. Am I just seeing it weird, or do you think it's fairly undiverse? Is that a word?
I think it's definitely,
and the women's game?
It definitely lacks diversity. That's for sure.
Yeah.
For
so
sure.
How do we engage different cultures on the girls and women's side?
I think it's $1 million question. I think, and truth be told, I mean, really, when you look at the bigger picture, is even both sides of the game, really, the diversity, even in terms of getting into the inner cities and getting into places where people can't afford it. I think on both sides, I think there's this project to go and put futsal courts into some of the inner cities and some of the in the inner cities and some of the major metropolitan areas in the country would be amazing. I'm sure we've all come across that male or female player that is not involved in youth club soccer going, why aren't you involved? And the bottom line is you can't afford it. So it really is going to come down to collective minds coming up with a strategy to try to bring in more diversity in the game to kind of reflect what our society is, contrary to what most people want to believe. On not to get into more politics, but
we know where you're going.
Yeah,
we agree. We're in agreement there.
But the reality is, what makes this country great and what makes Canada great is the fact that you've got so much diversity and people that bring so many different qualities to the cultures that allow for it to be, do I want to say boring, but definitely experience what you want to be. So I don't know what the whole answer is, but I would definitely say that it needs to be explored. And I think the idea is if somehow some of these places in terms of costs, but it's like everything else, how do you provide people with an opportunity to be able to establish this? And on a completely side note, I was watching Bryant Gumbel and the kind of the 60-minute sports, and there's a young man from Philadelphia that went on to go to school at Denver, and he they had the polo, the idea of the USA polo had gone into the inner cities and were able to like bring this kid out, and literally 13 years on, he's representing the USA. Here's a black man riding a horse, representing USA, being able to see amazing parts of the world. And the beauty is now it's paid forward. His brother's involved in the program.
Yeah.
Other kids are coming out of Philadelphia doing polo. I mean,
Right.
where's the closest
Yeah.
this kid's going to see a horse?
Right.
And so I watched this show, and I was just fascinating seeing, well, if you give people opportunity, if you go into these places to be able to bring out, and the same thing in this Hispanic community, you see some of the all girls teams that are together, and you're going, wow, they're phenomenal, and they kind of stick to their own culture and don't necessarily get involved. And you always ask them, why do they do it? And the always thing is cost. And so it's kind of sensitive because,
Right.
we all make our living from the game,
Right.
but we still give back and volunteer and go to different places to try to help give back the game. But it's something that I think we collectively, and we're not going to solve tonight, but we collectively need to kind of figure out how we, find more diversity in the sport, because it's only going to make the sport better. And as I always said, can you imagine seeing LeBron James in goal? I mean, seriously, someone like LeBron James in goal. I mean, Timmy Howard's a great goalkeeper.
Well, Usain Bolt is saying he's going to
Usain
try
Bolt.
out, and I mean,
Usain don't got a left foot, man. Let me tell you this right now. He's always talking up, man. Usain Bolt don't got a left foot. But I think if you can bring those sort of people within the game and provide them with an opportunity, it's only going to be better for everybody,
Yeah. I think the other piece that comes in a little bit on the financial side is obviously huge. I know our club, we have a foundation that tries to help mitigate that a little bit. But the other piece that comes in is if you are coming over from a place where girls don't play. I mean, in the U.S., we talk about not many women coaching, but there's tons of girls who play.
Yeah.
The numbers are even equal in a lot of states from what I understand. And you're coming in with a first generation over from a culture with limited financial resources, perhaps, not necessarily knowing our structure, which is a very different club structure than outside the U.S. And then you throw in the mix that girls just don't play. One summer I spent 8 weeks working at a soccer school in Austria, and I think in that entire time we had 8 girls in camp, and the rest were boys. So, you're dealing with a lot, not just American culture, but you're dealing with the whole melting pot of the cultures that, you wish we could solve it in a night. I think it's going to take a lot of different fronts to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I think the most important thing are these venues for us to continue to have those dialogues and discussions, and sometimes they are uncomfortable for people because it seems like we're bringing the race and diverse and equality and women versus men into it, but at the end of the day that we're trying to enhance our society. We're trying to give opportunities to people that makes in long term everybody more successful, and more happy. Can we be happy in this in this time of year? I think that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, we can talk about, there's so many topics that just freely flow. I mean, the pricing, and you mentioned it earlier, like we all work in youth sport. And so it's almost like it's tough to say we want to, we would love to have it free, but then we pay our car payments with it, and that's how we make our living. But, I mean, there are so many pockets of underserved neighborhoods that just don't have the chance. I mean, being from, and I always give a shout out to Flint, Michigan, Flint town, but
I've been to Flint.
I go back to Flint and clubs, there's some club soccer there that literally it's $175 to play. In our world, like $175, boom, gone.
Pair of boots.
But some communities, they struggle with that. They struggle with that. They don't have fields. They don't have nets because the nets keep getting stolen, and you have to take the nets down. And it's just, there's so many kids out there that if they're just given the opportunity, and I saw. I read an article about a former American football, I think it was a running back, and he builds houses in Atlanta with, he goes back and he helps his community, and I think he coined the term like giving someone a hand up and not a hand out, and to me that made it so powerful, and if we can target and come up with some master plan, whether it's through U.S. Soccer or a big corporation that is invested in football, and say, can we come up with a system and give kids that hand up,
For sure.
whether it's polo or soccer, or I know Dick's Sporting Goods did an initiative in Harlem with lacrosse.
Right.
And they had this documentary on it. It was phenomenal.
The Rangers doing hockey and New York Rangers going to Harlem to do ice hockey,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's amazing. So we have about 5 minutes left. So what I want to do is give our wonderful guests a little opportunity to give any shout outs or mention any things that are near and dear to their heart. So Sarah, you're up. Any shout outs you want to give to anyone, or any
Just
plugs?
a shout out to you for putting this together and getting it off the ground, and I'm excited to see where it goes and the conversation so far. And then absolutely for FCN, share your stories, anonymously or not. We'd love to hear from you and get it out there to kind of sort of get that story of what life as a female coach is like, whether you're coaching girls or whether you're coaching guys, and just kind of try to get more of us involved and keep us involved.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Hubie,
I just want
last little shouts out.
Yeah, a little shout out. I know it's maybe not politically correct again to say wishing everyone a Merry Christmas, but I would like to, and those who celebrate different holidays.
What's not politically correct about saying Merry Christmas?
Well, because some people,
Happy
you got
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, you got Kwanzaa, you got all a bunch of different things that people out. But I that's what I'm saying. I'm still gonna say Merry Christmas. That's what I grew up on, and I just want to obviously wish everyone out there who's supported and has followed this for the rest of the night. Wish them and their families a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and everyone here as well. Obviously for doing it and believing in a great cause, and obviously my good friend Carrie for keep pushing a good fight. And sometimes it might seem sometimes that you're up against the wall and no one's listening or no one's there to support you, but you do have great people backing you and wanting you to do well. So I think it's we just got to keep on pushing the envelope and doing the right thing.
Dutchie, do you got any shout outs, any parting words for us?
My shout out is simply to you.
To me?
For bringing this show to Chaotic Radio. It's huge. For being aiming at who you're aiming at, and it doesn't matter that you're aiming at women in soccer, because it's so interesting and it opens men's eyes to what is going on that they miss because they don't see it. We've sat round tables and it opened my eyes watching you, listening to you, and seeing men's reaction and how they spoke about it. One of the things that we spoke about this, and I'll real quick, women didn't play football where I came from. They didn't do it. And now I'm a huge part of the sport where the women, it's a 50-50. What we have to do now is create, just like you guys were talking about, is create that 50-50 on the coaching side of it as well as the playing side. This helps. It's huge. So my shout out, Kerry Taylor, WTF.
Women Talking Football.
Exactly. Thank you for doing it. It's huge.
No problem. Do we have any time left? Can I give a shout out, or are we good?
You can give a shout out.
I can give a shout out. So thank you, Sarah and Hubie, for taking part in tonight's show. Episode number 2, we're going to grow it. We've got great people on par in the future, and it's growing organically. Thanks for everyone on Facebook who tuned in and or listened in. Again, the platform is Women Talking Football, is to grow the game of football/soccer for women. And, we need men's help. We need everyone's help to impact and influence the world's game and to get more women involved at the higher levels and everything. So always shouts out to Flint, Michigan. Never forget where you're from. University of Michigan.
The 6th.
Go,
as Drake would say, the 6th.
The 313.
I know you love them because I saw some of those pathetic posts about the football game the other day.
Oh, Michigan. Oh, go blue. Through and through. Love American football, college football, Jim Harbaugh. But yeah, so again, want to just give a shout out to Coaches Across Continents and intellectstrategy.com. And so
one quick question.
Sure.
For the listeners and for us. Next week's in between Christmas and the New Year. Are we doing a show next week?
I had planned on it.
Let's do it.
Are we good? Do we have an engineer?
I'm your engineer.
All right.
Hey, I wasn't an engineer before tonight, but I am now.
Hey, we're all learning. We're all learning together. Thanks, everyone. Women Talking Football.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Tottenham's gonna do it again. They can't stop on the boys from Tottenham, the boys from